I was supposed to scatter my father's ashes at sea, but instead I was staring at his empty casket through the mortuary security camera feed while his body lay in a freezer 3 miles away. The funeral was in 2 hours. Nobody knew Dad wasn't actually dead yet. Let me explain how we got here. 3 days ago, I walked into Dad's hospital room to find my husband Devon standing over his bed, hand hovering near the morphine drip. The heart monitor showed erratic patterns. Devon didn't know I'd come early. Didn't know I'd installed a nanny cam in the flower arrangement the week before, after the nurses mentioned his concerned son-in-law visited every night alone. Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from, and if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed, because tomorrow, I've saved something extra special for you. I watched from the doorway as Devon's finger moved toward the drip control. Just before he could increase the dosage, I cleared my throat. The look on his face, half guilt, half calculation, told me everything I needed to know about my marriage of 6 years. Checking on Dad? I asked, voice steady despite my racing heart. Devon recovered quickly, that charming smile sliding into place like a mask. Just keeping him company, babe. You know how much I care about Raymond. Raymond. My father hated being called Raymond. Devon knew Dad preferred Ray. Such a small thing, but it was always the small things that revealed the truth. Dad's eyes were closed, but I saw his finger twitch. The movement Devon missed entirely because he was too busy playing the devoted husband. My father, the man who'd built a shipping empire from nothing, who'd survived hostile takeovers and market crashes, was pretending to be unconscious while his son-in-law tried to murder him. The pieces fell into place with sickening clarity. The sudden illness. The rapid deterioration. The mysterious infection that doctors couldn't quite identify. Devon, with his medical sales background, would know exactly which compounds were difficult to trace. Would know how to make murder look like natural decline. I brought his favorite cookies, I said, moving to Dad's bedside, deliberately positioning myself between him and Devon. Why don't you go grab some coffee? You look exhausted. Devon hesitated, and in that hesitation, I saw the monster I'd been sleeping beside for 6 years. But he nodded, kissed my forehead with practiced affection, and left. The moment the door closed, Dad's eyes snapped open. Despite his weakened state, his gaze was sharp as broken glass. How long have you known? His voice was barely a whisper, but it carried the weight of betrayal we both felt. About you pretending? Just now. About him? I pulled out my phone, showed him the footage from the nanny cam. 3 separate visits where Devon had adjusted medications, tampered with 4 lines, even once tried to smother Dad with a pillow before a nurse's approach scared him off. 2 weeks. Dad watched the footage, his jaw tightening with each frame. Why didn't you stop him? Because I needed evidence. And because I needed to know why. I sat on the edge of his bed, taking his frail hand. The man who'd taught me to negotiate shipping contracts, who'd shown me how to spot a con from a mile away, felt like paper beneath my fingers. Dad, Devon thinks you're changing your will. He's been intercepting your calls with your lawyer. The hell he has. Dad tried to sit up, failed. I changed it 3 weeks ago. Everything goes to you, to the business, to the scholarship fund for underprivileged kids. Devon gets nothing. He doesn't know that. Your lawyer mentioned during your last call, the one Devon listened to, that you wanted to make significant changes. Devon assumed you were cutting me out, giving him control. I paused, letting the irony sink in. He's been trying to kill you before the new will is executed, thinking he'll inherit everything through me. Dad's laugh was bitter. So he's not just a murderer. He's a stupid murderer. There's more. I pulled up another file on my phone. I hired a forensic accountant 2 months ago. Devon's been embezzling from your shipping company. Small amounts at first, routed through shell corporations. But in the last 6 months, he's stolen over $3 million. The heart monitor's beeping intensified, and I squeezed Dad's hand gently. Easy. Save your strength. Because here's what we're going to do. I laid out the plan I'd been building for 2 weeks, ever since I'd confirmed my suspicions about Devon. It was audacious, possibly illegal, and absolutely necessary. Dad listened, his expression shifting from anger to something like pride. "You're more ruthless than I ever was," he said when I finished. "I learned from the best." I stood, adjusting his blankets. "Now, you need to convince everyone you're dying. The doctors, the nurses, Devon especially. Can you do that?" Dad's smile was cold. "Sweetheart, I've been playing dead in business negotiations for 40 years. This is just another deal." "Good. Because in 72 hours, I'm burying you. And Devon is going to wish you'd actually died." The next 3 days were a masterclass in deception. I played the grieving daughter perfectly, crying at appropriate moments, accepting condolences with grace, even letting Devon comfort me while I mentally catalogued every manipulation technique he employed. He was good, I had to give him that. The concerned husband, so worried about his wife's emotional state, so helpful with funeral arrangements. What Devon didn't know was that Dad had been transferred to a private facility under an assumed name. The death certificate was real, filed by a doctor who owed Dad several favors from a shipping dispute years ago. The body in the mortuary's casket was a John Doe from the county morgue, someone with no family, who Dad would later ensure was properly buried with full honors. The funeral was set for Saturday. Devon had insisted on helping with everything, probably to ensure there were no last-minute will readings or surprises. He'd even suggested we have the service at an expensive venue, spend lavishly on flowers and catering. Dad would have wanted it, he'd said, his hand on my shoulder. He deserved the best. What he meant was, let's drain the estate account before anyone looks too closely at the finances. I agreed to everything. Let him make calls, sign contracts, play the supportive spouse. All while my team, Dad's most trusted people, the ones who'd helped build his empire, quietly gathered every piece of evidence we needed. The breakthrough came on Thursday night. Devon thought I was asleep when he made the call from our home office. I was in the hallway, recording every word through the door he'd carelessly left ajar. "It's done. He's gone. The funeral's Saturday." A pause. "Yes, I'm sure. I was there when he flatlined." Played the devastated son-in-law perfectly. Another pause, then a laugh that made my blood freeze. "The wife? She's a mess. Completely dependent on me now. Once the estate settles, we'll wait 6 months, then I'll file for divorce. Irreconcilable differences. She'll be too broken to fight it." The voice on the other end was female. Young. I'd wondered if there was someone else, but hearing confirmation still felt like a physical blow. "I know, babe. 2 more weeks, just to be safe. Then we can be together openly. The Maldives house is already purchased under the LLC. She'll never find it." His voice dropped lower, intimate. "Can't wait to marry you properly. This time with someone who's actually worth my time." I stopped recording, backed away from the door silently. In our bedroom, I sat in the dark, letting the rage build into something cold and precise. Devon had been planning this from the start. The courtship, the marriage, the years of playing devoted husband, all of it was a long con to access Dad's wealth. But he'd made one critical mistake. He'd underestimated both of us. Preparing and narrating this story took us a lot of time, so if you are enjoying it, like this video, it means a lot to us. Now back to the story. Friday morning, I made a call to Detective Sarah Chin. Yes, I knew a Chin, some names are useful, from the fraud division. She'd been investigating a series of corporate embezzlements and was very interested in the evidence I'd compiled. We met at a coffee shop far from our neighborhood, and I handed her everything, financial records, recorded conversations, the nanny cam footage, even the name of the woman Devon planned to run away with. This is enough for multiple warrants, Sarah said, flipping through the documents. Murder, conspiracy, embezzlement, fraud. But you're sure about the timing? Positive. I want him to think he's won. I want him to feel safe. I stirred my untouched coffee. Can you have officers ready by Saturday afternoon? At a funeral? Sarah looked uncomfortable. That's perfect, I finished. Because that same day, at 4 p.m., he's supposed to marry his mistress. Small ceremony at his friend's estate in the hills. Very exclusive. Very private. Sarah's eyebrows rose. He's marrying someone else while you're burying your father? He doesn't think I know about the ceremony. He told me he has a business meeting that afternoon, something urgent he can't miss. I pulled up the calendar on my phone, showed her the invitation I'd found on Devon's laptop. The wedding venue, the guests, the officiator, all documented. So you want us to arrest him at his own illegal wedding? Sarah smiled slowly. That's cold. That's justice. And I want everyone there to see it. His friends, his mistress, her family. I want them all to know exactly what he is. We finalized the details. Warrants would be prepared but not executed until I gave the signal. Undercover officers would be positioned at both the funeral and the wedding venue. Everything had to happen simultaneously, Dad's resurrection and Devon's arrest, timed perfectly to destroy any chance of him talking his way out. Saturday morning arrived with cruel sunshine. The funeral chapel was packed with Dad's business associates, family friends, people whose children had benefited from his scholarship programs. Devon worked the room like a politician, shaking hands, accepting sympathies, playing his role flawlessly. I watched him from across the room, remembering the man I'd thought I married. The funny, attentive guy who'd seemed genuinely interested in my work, who'd supported my decision to get my MBA, who'd held me through my mother's death 3 years ago. Was any of it real? Or had I been just another mark from the beginning? The service began at noon. I gave the eulogy Dad and I had written together, crying real tears because even though he was alive, I was mourning something, the life I'd thought I had, the marriage I'd believed in, the trust I'd given so freely. Devon sat in the front row, dabbing his eyes with a handkerchief, the perfect image of a grieving son-in-law. Every so often, he'd check his watch, subtle but noticeable if you were looking for it. His illegal wedding was in 4 hours. He had to get through this charade, then race to the hills for his real celebration. After the service, there was a reception at the chapel's hall. More condolences, more performances. Devon stayed close to me, his arm around my shoulders, whispering how strong I was being, how proud Dad would have been. At 2:30 p.m., he pulled me aside. "Babe, I'm so sorry, but I have to head out. That emergency meeting I mentioned, they need me there by 4. I looked up at him, this man I'd shared a bed with for 6 years, and smiled sadly. Of course. Business doesn't stop, even for death. Dad would understand. He kissed my forehead. I'll be back tonight. We can talk about next steps, the will, everything. But right now, you should be with family and friends. Devon?" I caught his hand as he turned to leave. "Thank you. For everything. For being here, for supporting me. I don't know what I'd do without you." The guilt that flashed across his face was almost convincing. Almost. That's what marriage is about. For better or worse, right? Right, I agreed, squeezing his hand. For better or worse. I watched him leave, then checked my phone. A text from Sarah, teams in position at both locations. "Your father's ready. Waiting for your signal." I sent Dad a quick message, "It's time." Then I turned to the remaining guests and announced that I needed some air, that I'd be back shortly. What I actually did was slip out the back entrance where Dad's driver was waiting. "Miss Sterling," he greeted me, opening the door to the black sedan. "Your father's at the secondary location as planned." The drive took 15 minutes. We pulled up to a nondescript office building where Dad was waiting in a private suite, looking healthier than he had in weeks. The nursing team had done an excellent job bringing him back to strength once Devon's toxins were out of his system. "How do I look?" Dad asked, adjusting his tie. He was wearing one of his best suits, the navy one he reserved for depositions and hostile takeovers. "Like a man back from the dead." I hugged him carefully, still aware of his recovery. "Ready to crash a wedding?" "Oh, sweetheart," Dad's smile was predatory. "I've been ready for 3 days." We had 45 minutes to get to the venue in the hills. The ceremony was scheduled for 4 p.m., probably timed so Devon could be back in the city by evening, maintaining his alibi of a business meeting. He'd probably planned to tell me it ran late, that he'd had drinks with clients, sorry he couldn't be there during my grief. The venue was stunning, a modern glass structure overlooking the valley, intimate and expensive. Security at the gate checked our names against a list. Dad was registered under his middle name, Ethan, as a business associate of the bride's family. I was listed as his assistant. Devon had no idea we were coming. We entered through the main doors at 3:55 p.m. The ceremony space was decorated in white and gold, maybe 30 guests seated in elegant chairs. Soft music played. And there, at the altar, stood Devon in a different suit than he'd worn to my father's funeral. Beside him, a beautiful young woman in an ivory wedding dress, her face radiant with excitement. My stomach churned, but I kept my expression neutral. Dad's hand found mine, squeezed gently. We took seats in the back row, unnoticed in the pre-ceremony bustle. At exactly 4 p.m., the music changed. The bride began her walk down the aisle on her father's arm. Devon's face transformed, genuine love, or a good facsimile of it. He'd never looked at me like that, I realized. Not even in our early days. The officiator began the ceremony. "Dearly beloved, we are gathered here today." I pulled out my phone, sent a single text to Sarah, "Now." The officiator continued. "If anyone has any reason why these two should not be wed, speak now or forever hold your peace." Dad stood up. The movement was slow, deliberate, impossible to ignore. Heads turned. Devon's face went from confusion to recognition to absolute horror in the span of 3 seconds. "I object," Dad said, his voice carrying across the chapel. "On the grounds that the groom is already married. To my daughter." The gasps were audible. Devon's bride turned to him, confusion morphing into fury. "What? Devon, what is he talking about?" But Devon was staring at Dad like he was seeing a ghost. Which, technically, he was. "Hello, son." Dad's smile was cold as winter. "Surprised to see me?" "You shouldn't be. You're terrible at murder." The chaos that erupted was immediate. The bride screaming at Devon. Guests pulling out phones. Devon trying to speak, to explain, his mouth opening and closing like a suffocating fish. And then, right on cue, Detective Chen walked through the main entrance with 4 uniformed officers behind her. "Devon Sterling," she announced, her voice cutting through the chaos. "You're under arrest for attempted murder, embezzlement, fraud, and conspiracy to commit fraud." Devon ran. He actually tried to run, pushing past his bride, knocking over a floral arrangement, heading for the side exit. He made it maybe 10 feet before 2 officers tackled him to the ground. The expensive suit, the one he'd bought with my father's stolen money, tore at the shoulder as they cuffed him. "You can't do this," Devon shouted as they hauled him to his feet. "I have rights. This is harassment." "You have the right to remain silent," Sarah continued, reading him his Miranda rights while his bride sobbed and guests filmed everything on their phones. You have the right to an attorney. Dad walked down the aisle toward Devon, and I followed. We stood there, the man who'd supposedly died and the wife who'd supposedly been left behind, looking at the monster who'd tried to destroy us both. $3 million, Dad said conversationally. That's what you stole from my company. And you tried to kill me for what you thought would be hundreds of millions more. All while planning to divorce my daughter and leave her with nothing. Devon's face had gone from red to white to green. He looked at me, and I saw the exact moment he realized I'd known everything. Had known and had orchestrated this entire nightmare. You knew? His voice was barely a whisper. I knew. I stepped closer, my voice low enough that only he could hear. I knew about the poison. About the embezzlement. About her. I gestured to his sobbing bride. I knew you were a coward and a thief. What I needed was proof. So thank you for that. For being so arrogant you didn't bother covering your tracks properly. The nanny cam, Devon breathed, the pieces finally clicking into place. In the hospital room. You recorded everything. Everything, I confirmed. Every conversation. Every attempt. Every time you thought you were so clever. Did you really think I'd let you murder my father and steal my inheritance without consequences? Sarah pulled Devon toward the exit, but I had one more thing to say. Devon? He turned back, and I smiled. I hope prison teaches you something about patience. Because you're going to have a lot of time to think about how you underestimated both of us. How you gambled everything on us being weak. How you lost. They took him away, still protesting, still trying to explain. His bride collapsed into her father's arms, wailing about being deceived. The guests slowly dispersed, phones in hand, already sharing the scandal across social media. Dad and I stood in the empty chapel, surrounded by Devon's shattered dreams. I can't believe he actually tried to run, Dad said, a slight smile tugging at his lips. I can. He's always been a coward. I looked at the altar, at the abandoned wedding arch. Do you think she knew? The bride? Based on her reaction? No. She's another victim. Dad sighed. We'll make sure she's taken care of, that she has the resources to rebuild. It's not her fault she fell for his lies. We walked out together, father and daughter, back into the sunlight. The funeral was hours ago. The wedding was destroyed. And Devon was on his way to booking, where he'd be processed, photographed, and introduced to the reality of his situation. What now? I asked as Dad's driver pulled up. Now? Dad opened the car door for me. Now we go rebuild the company. Clean house of anyone else who might have been working with Devon. Make sure our security is tighter. And maybe. He paused, maybe you take over as CEO. I think I'm ready to step back. Spend time with my daughter. Maybe travel a bit. I looked at him, this man who taught me everything about business and apparently everything about revenge too. Are you sure? You orchestrated all of this. You kept your head while everything fell apart. You played the long game and won. Dad smiled. Yeah, sweetheart. I'm sure. The company's in better hands with you. As we drove away from the venue, I pulled up social media. The story was already trending. Hashtag wedding arrest. Hashtag fake dead dad. Hashtag revenge served. Videos from multiple angles showing the exact moment Devon realized his dead father-in-law was very much alive. The look on his face was already becoming a meme. My phone rang. Sarah. The evidence you provided is solid, she said. DA says this is one of the cleanest cases she's seen. Devon's looking at minimum 15 years, possibly 25 with the attempted murder charge. His lawyer's already trying to negotiate a plea. No plea, I said firmly. We go to trial. I want everything public record. Every lie, every theft, every murder attempt. That's what I told them you'd say. Sarah paused. For what it's worth, you did good. Most people wouldn't have had the patience for this. They'd have confronted him immediately, let emotion override strategy. My father taught me patience. And he taught me that the best revenge isn't fast, it's thorough. After hanging up, I leaned back in the leather seat, watching the city pass by. Somewhere in a holding cell, Devon was realizing that his perfectly planned future had evaporated. The money, the new wife, the life he'd built on lies, all gone. And here I was, alive, vindicated, with my father beside me and a company to run. You okay? Dad asked, noticing my silence. Yeah. I smiled, and for the first time in weeks, it was genuine. Yeah, I really am. Because Devon was right about one thing, the will had changed. Everything did go to me. The company, the properties, the accounts he'd been so eager to steal from. But what he'd never understood was that I'd earned it. Not through marriage or manipulation, but through years of working alongside my father, learning the business, proving myself. He'd tried to cheat his way to success and failed spectacularly. I'd done it the hard way and won. As we pulled up to Dad's building, I made a mental note of everything that needed to happen next: press statements, internal investigations, security upgrades, a meeting with the board. The real work was just beginning. But for now, in this moment, I allowed myself to savor the victory. Devon had served divorce papers at my father's funeral, metaphorically, at least, by planning his escape. In return, I'd served him an arrest warrant at his luxury wedding. Fair was fair. Dinner? Dad asked, stepping out of the car. Dinner, I agreed. Then tomorrow, we start rebuilding. Tomorrow, Dad repeated. But tonight, we celebrate being alive and being smarter than our enemies. I raised an imaginary glass. To being smarter than our enemies. Dad laughed, and the sound was pure joy. To that, sweetheart. Always to that. The trial lasted 6 weeks, and every day was a masterclass in public humiliation for Devon. The prosecution presented our evidence methodically: security footage of him adjusting Dad's morphine drip, recorded conversations with his mistress plotting the timeline, financial records showing $3 million funneled through shell companies he'd created. His lawyer tried everything, claimed I'd fabricated evidence, that Dad and I were conspiring against an innocent man, that the stress of the marriage had driven Devon to make poor choices. The jury deliberated for 4 hours. Guilty on all counts. Devon's face crumbled as the verdict was read. Attempted murder, embezzlement, fraud, conspiracy. The judge set sentencing for 2 weeks later, and Devon was remanded without bail. As they led him away in handcuffs, he looked at me one final time. I saw no remorse in his eyes, only rage at being caught. I felt nothing. The sentencing hearing brought closure I hadn't realized I needed. The judge, a stern woman in her 60s, looked at Devon with open disgust. You betrayed every trust placed in you, she said, reviewing the evidence folders. You married with the intent to steal. You attempted to murder your wife's father for financial gain. You showed no remorse, no humanity, no conscience. She sentenced him to 23 years in federal prison with no possibility of parole for 15. Devon's mistress, who'd been called as a witness, sobbed in the gallery. She'd truly believed he loved her, had no knowledge of his crimes. Dad had quietly set up a fund for her counseling and legal fees, his way of apologizing for her getting caught in the crossfire. After the sentencing, reporters swarmed the courthouse steps. I'd prepared a brief statement with our PR team. Justice has been served today, I said, cameras flashing. My father and I hope this case reminds others that greed and violence have consequences. We're grateful to law enforcement and the legal system for their thorough work. I didn't mention Devon by name. He'd wanted to be someone important, someone powerful. Instead, he became a cautionary tale, a footnote in business fraud textbooks. The media frenzy lasted another month. True crime podcasts dissected every detail. Social media debated whether my revenge had been justified or excessive. The wedding arrest video had over 50 million views. Devon's face, frozen in that moment of horror when he saw Dad alive, became a symbol of cosmic justice. I stopped reading the comments eventually. What mattered wasn't public opinion but rebuilding what Devon had tried to destroy. Reynolds Technologies underwent complete restructuring. I brought in an independent security firm to audit every department, every account, every hire Devon had influenced. We discovered 2 more employees he'd recruited specifically to help embezzle funds. They were terminated and charged. The company's reputation took a hit initially, but our transparency in addressing the corruption actually strengthened investor confidence. 6 months after the trial, Dad officially retired and I became CEO. My first major decision was creating a whistleblower protection program. Anyone who suspected fraud or abuse could report anonymously without fear of retaliation. I never wanted another Devon to flourish in the shadows. The divorce was finalized in absentia. Devon's lawyer tried to claim he deserved spousal support, given our years of marriage. The judge laughed. Literally laughed. With Devon's criminal conviction and proof he'd married me under false pretenses, I retained everything. The house, the cars, even the fancy watch collection he'd bought with stolen money, all liquidated, with proceeds going to Dad's scholarship fund. I visited Dad every Sunday for brunch. We never talked about Devon unless absolutely necessary. Instead, we discussed business strategies, his travel plans, my ideas for expanding the company internationally. He'd grown philosophical in his retirement, spending time writing his memoirs and mentoring young entrepreneurs. "Do you regret it?" he asked one Sunday, over Eggs Benedict at his favorite cafe. "The whole elaborate revenge? We could have just called the police immediately." I considered the question carefully. If we'd called the police that first night, Devon would have claimed innocence. His lawyer would have argued the nanny cam footage was inadmissible, that he was just checking on you. The embezzlement might have stuck, but attempted murder? Harder to prove without the pattern of behavior we documented. So no regrets? No regrets. He made choices. I made sure those choices had consequences. I sipped my coffee. Besides, you taught me that patience wins wars. We didn't just stop Devon, we exposed an entire system of fraud, protected future victims, and strengthened the company. That wouldn't have happened with a rushed arrest. Dad smiled, proud. "You've become a better strategist than I ever was. I learned from the best." 3 years later, I received a letter from Devon. Prison had not been kind to him, his lawyer mentioned he'd been in the infirmary twice, had no friends among the inmates, spent most days in isolation for his own protection. The letter was rambling, alternating between apologies and accusations. He claimed he'd loved me once. That the plan had started as genuine affection before greed corrupted him. He begged for forgiveness, for a chance to explain, for consideration when his parole hearing came up in 12 more years. I read it once, then filed it with his other legal documents. I didn't respond. Devon had stolen enough of my time, my trust, my life. He didn't deserve another second. Instead, I focused on the future. Reynolds Technologies was thriving under my leadership. We'd expanded into sustainable shipping solutions, opened offices in 6 new countries, doubled our scholarship programs. Dad was healthy, happy, and traveling the world with his new partner, a retired teacher he'd met at a charity event. And me? I was whole again. Stronger, wiser, more careful about trust but not closed off to it. I'd learned that love existed, but so did deception. That family was worth protecting at any cost. That revenge, when executed perfectly, wasn't about destruction, it was about justice. Devon had tried to bury us both. Instead, he'd dug his own grave and jumped involuntarily. Some nights, I still thought about that moment at the wedding. The look on his face when he saw Dad alive. The collapse of every lie he'd built. The officers reading his rights while his bride sobbed. And I smiled. Not because I enjoyed his suffering, but because we'd survived. We'd outsmarted someone who thought we were weak. We'd turned his weapon against him and walked away victorious. Dad once told me that success is the best revenge. He was wrong. The best revenge is watching your enemy realize they were never as smart as they thought they were, right before the cell door locks. And that revenge? It was absolutely worth the wait. Up next, you've got 2 more standout stories right on your screen. If this one hit the mark, you won't want to pass these up. Just click and check them out. And don't forget to like, subscribe and turn on the notification bell, so you don't miss any upload from us.